The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I was already in bed. I almost didn't pick up, but I saw it was Michael, and Michael doesn't call after 10 unless something is wrong. I picked up. He said, "Mom, when did you last sleep more than 5 hours?" I didn't have an answer, not a real one. And that was the moment, standing in my dark bedroom in Providence at 11:30 at night, that I started to understand something I'd gotten wrong for most of my life. My name is Pat Walsh. I'm 80 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that trying harder was the answer to everything. To every problem, every setback, every inadequacy, real or imagined. Try harder, do more, hold it together. I thought that was strength. I was wrong. I ran hospital administration for 30 years. 30 years of departments, budgets, staffing crises, regulatory reviews, and the specific exhaustion of being one of the only women in the room who wasn't there to take notes. I was good at all of it, I genuinely was. And I want to be careful here. I'm not saying any of that was wrong. What I'm saying is that somewhere along the way, the trying became the point, not the result, the trying itself. As long as I was working hard enough, striving hard enough, pushing hard enough, I felt like a good person, or at least a legitimate one. Stop that, and I didn't know who I was. My marriage to Frank ended in 1998. We'd been married for 23 years. I thought we were managing. I thought management was the same as thriving. I managed the children's schedules. I managed the household finances. I managed Frank's moods when his back injury took away a career he hadn't finished building. I managed and managed and managed, and the marriage got quieter and quieter, and I tried harder and harder to hold everything together. And one day Frank said to me, very quietly over dinner, "Pat, I don't think trying harder is going to fix this." I thought he was wrong. I doubled down, signed us up for counseling, restructured the finances, took on additional projects at work to increase our income. Tried harder. 3 years later, we signed the divorce papers. I want to tell you something that took me decades to understand. Trying harder is not always an act of love. Sometimes it's an act of control, and sometimes it's a very sophisticated way of avoiding the question you're most afraid to ask. The question I was afraid to ask was, what if nothing I do is enough? As long as I kept trying, I didn't have to sit with that fear. The trying kept it at bay. But the fear was always there, running underneath everything, like a motor you stop hearing after a while, until someone turns it off. After the divorce, I threw myself into work. This surprises nobody who knew me then. I made department head the following year. I restructured 3 divisions in 4 years. I received the kind of professional validation that I had always told myself was what I was working toward. And I came home to an empty apartment and ate soup from a can and watched the news and went to bed and got up and did it again. I thought I was doing fine. I was genuinely convinced. My daughter Karen. We've always had a complicated relationship, and I've talked about that before. Karen said something to me once that I dismissed completely at the time. She said, "Mom, you use working the way other people use drinking." I laughed it off. I told her I worked because I was good at it and it mattered. Both of those things were true. They just weren't the whole truth. The whole truth was that as long as there was a next project, a next challenge, a next problem to solve, I didn't have to stop and feel what had happened to my family. Now, I'm 80 years old. I've been retired for 15 years, and let me tell you what 15 years of not having a department to run has taught me. The things I tried hardest at are not the things that mattered. I'm not saying the work didn't matter. I'm saying the trying, the compulsive, identity-level trying, cost me things the work was supposed to compensate for. I missed Michael's high school graduation dinner because of a staffing crisis. I missed Karen's first dance recital because of a board meeting. I missed Frank at his lowest point because I was too busy solving problems to notice that the problem was us. When Michael called me that Tuesday night and asked when I'd last slept, he wasn't just asking about sleep. He'd been watching me keep my apartment immaculate, watching me volunteer for 3 committees at the senior center, watching me manage and organize and structure my retirement the same way I'd managed and organized my career. He said, "Mom, what happens if you stop?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If you sat in your apartment tomorrow and just didn't do anything, what would happen?" I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer was, I didn't know, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Here's what I did. The next morning, that Wednesday, I sat in my chair by the window. I didn't make a list. I didn't check my phone. I didn't organize anything. I just sat. 4 minutes in, I was deeply uncomfortable. My hands kept reaching for a pen that wasn't there. My mind kept generating tasks. Call the dentist. Order those vitamins. Look into the Tuesday lecture series. 10 minutes in, I noticed something I hadn't noticed in years. The quality of the light in my apartment in the morning, how it comes through the east window and catches the dust in the air, how the radiator makes a particular sound just before it fully kicks on. Small things, things that had always been there, things I had never been still enough to see. By 20 minutes, something loosened. I can't explain it better than that. Something I'd been holding, not consciously, but constantly, loosened. And I sat there for another hour, just sat, without trying to fix or improve or prepare for anything. I didn't feel enlightened. I didn't have a revelation. I just felt quiet, and I realized I hadn't felt quiet in a very long time. I thought I was doing the right thing all those years. I believed that my effort was protecting my family, that the harder I worked, the safer we all were. And in a material sense, that was partly true. The bills were paid, the insurance was solid, the retirement accounts were funded. But my children didn't need more insurance. They needed a mother who sat still long enough to hear what they were actually saying. Nobody told me that being good at your job could become a substitute for being present. Nobody told me that striving can be a form of running. Nobody told me that the things you try hardest to hold together sometimes need you to put them down first. I've thought a lot over these 15 years of retirement about what I was actually afraid of. The trying, I think, was a way of answering a question I'd had since I was very young. Am I enough? If I work hard enough, achieve enough, manage enough, then yes, clearly I am enough. The effort becomes the proof. But it was never actually proof of anything, because the question came from a place that effort can't reach. I want to be careful here because I don't want this to sound like something a wellness brochure would say. I'm not telling you to stop caring about your life. I'm not telling you to stop doing things that matter. I'm not telling you that striving is bad. I'm telling you what it cost me specifically. And what it cost me was the experience of being exactly where I was at any given moment. I was always preparing for the next thing, always solving the problem before it became a problem, always getting ahead of the need, which meant I was never fully in the room, never fully in the conversation, never fully there with Frank or Karen or Michael or anyone really, unless a crisis required my complete attention. The crises had my full presence. The ordinary Tuesday dinners did not. And ordinary Tuesday dinners are most of a life. Karen and I have been talking more, really talking, in the past few years. Carefully, slowly, like people who've been careful around each other for so long that being direct feels strange. She said something last spring that I've written down and put on my refrigerator. She said, "Mom, I never needed you to be competent. I needed you to be curious about me." Curious. Not helpful, not organized, not efficient. Curious. I thought about that for weeks because I was never not curious about Karen. I thought about her constantly, but my thinking about her was mostly in terms of what she needed done, what problem to solve, what next step to facilitate. I was curious about her logistics, not about her inner life. Those are two different things, and I spent 30 years confusing them. At 80, here is what I know. The things I'm most glad of from my working years are not the achievements, not the promotions, not the departments I turned around. The things I'm glad of are the conversations I had, the people I actually listened to, the moments, rarer than I'd like to admit, when I put down my mental to-do list and was just there with someone. Those moments were not the ones I tried hardest during. Those were the ones where I stopped trying. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes from decades of striving. Not exhaustion. I know what exhaustion feels like. This is different. It's the tiredness that comes from having held yourself up for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to lean. I didn't know how to lean. I was constitutionally opposed to leaning. I thought asking for help was failure. I thought needing rest was weakness. I thought sitting still was waste. What I call strength kept me from the things that would have actually strengthened me. Michael calls every Sunday now, not to check on my logistics, though he does that lovingly and efficiently because he is my son. He calls to talk, just to talk. Last Sunday he asked me what I'd been thinking about, not what I'd been doing, what I'd been thinking about. And I told him. For 40 minutes I told him. And then he told me what he'd been thinking about. That was the whole call. No agenda. No problem solved. No logistics. Just two people actually talking to each other. I don't know why it took me 80 years to learn how to do that. But I'm doing it now, and it turns out it was there all along. I just kept trying too hard to see it. If you're someone who has spent your life trying hard, and I mean in the way I mean it, not just working, but using effort as a wall between yourself and the question you're most afraid to ask, I want to ask you something. What happens if you stop? Not forever, not dramatically, just tomorrow morning. Just sit in your chair and see what's there. It might be uncomfortable. It probably will be. It was for me. But it might also be the most useful thing you do all week. The phone call that night, Michael asking about my sleep, was not a turning point in the dramatic sense. There was no lightning bolt, no single moment of revelation. Just a question from my son that I couldn't answer. And in not being able to answer it, I heard something. I heard how tired I was. And I heard that the tired wasn't new. It had been there a long time, underneath all the trying, waiting for me to notice. Life taught me to stop trying so hard. It took 80 years. It didn't have to. Maybe it doesn't have to for you. Leave me a comment if this hits something for you. I read every one. And if there's someone in your life who runs on effort the way I did, who uses trying as armor, share this with them. Sometimes all it takes is the right question at the right time, even at 11:30 at night.